Hey guys, welcome back to another video. My name is Caroline. I'm a first-year medical student at the 𝐒𝐂𝐈𝐒𝐋𝐈𝐒 College of Physicians and Surgeons, also known as Columbia Medical School. And today I'll be sharing some interview advice, tips and tricks that helped me through the cycle. If this is your first time here, hi and welcome. Thank you so much for clicking and for watching this long-awaited video because I've actually gotten several requests to make this type of video, interview advice, basically just ways to do your best throughout the medical school cycle. I know it is a long and potentially tough and just Zoom heavy road, so if you guys are on it right now, just know that you can do it. It will be very rewarding once the spring comes, and honestly, regardless of what happens, you will be in a good place and you're gonna do well and you're gonna do fantastic, and eventually things will turn out right. So I guess before getting into interview specific advice, I wanted to share some reflections on medical school and how that sort of is similar to or different from undergrad, at least from my experience at Columbia Med School. And it's different for each med school, so I can only speak from experience, but pass fail, super nice. That's one thing that you should consider when looking at med schools, applying to med schools, and then eventually choosing med schools is the type of grading system. I think we are, for Columbia, we're a 1.5 year preclinical and it's pass fail. And our AOA or alpha omega alpha comes out after match. And so it really is just very conducive to a collaborative atmosphere. It's a relief that you don't need to get 100% on every exam. You study as hard as you can, remember as much as you can, and then take the exam. Once you take the exam, review the things you got wrong or that you missed. It's not penalizing you. It's not, you're not going to get in trouble for getting anything wrong. It's more of a recognizing what you still need to learn and then trying your best to learn it. So they really do want to help you, and they want to help you learn, and they want to make sure you have good mental health. They encourage you to take care of your physical health as well and to have fun and to get some sun, and it has been a really good experience. I'm not going to say that it's not a lot of studying. It is a lot of studying, but it's studying on your own time and in your own way. So I do really appreciate that. Okay, so now getting into the med school interview advice. So at the time of posting, this will probably be in the fall or winter of 2022. And so I applied during the cycle, the 2021 to 22 cycle. And you guys probably already know the timeline, right? It's gonna be your primaries and your secondaries, and then your interview invites start rolling in. Earliest I've heard is August. That's super duper early. And then latest maybe around February-ish of the next year. It's okay if you have not received interviews as early as your peers. I don't think it's necessary, and it's probably not useful or helpful. And it might even be a little bit hurtful towards yourself to compare yourself to what's happening with other people around you, because everyone's background is different, everyone's story is different, and everyone's academic sort of interests and experiences are different, and so you can't really equate those things. So hopefully that helps to mitigate some of the nerves surrounding that. So when I was interviewing for schools, everything was over Zoom because it was during COVID, and so I was able to really just plan out the specific dates that I wanted to choose. Everything was going to be from my laptop, so it was super convenient actually. You just didn't get to go and see the campus, but I would have a little notebook, write down the dates on a main calendar page of this day I'm gonna have this interview, the next Monday I'm gonna have that interview. And so really just laying it out for yourself so you can see it visually, and then I feel like that helps you to mentally prepare for it as well. I would do some prep before the interview. I would highly recommend doing prep and some research on the school before you start. I've heard from some of my peers here that they didn't really do any research before their interview about the school. Some did a whole bunch of research on the school's academic schedule, the school's clubs and offerings, and the basic things to do around the area. Those kinds of are extremes. I kind of would recommend going somewhere in the middle. So maybe 1 or 2 nights before, most likely one night before, I would go on the website. I would look through the club offerings they have. I would look through their curriculum, just understand if it's pass fail, understand if it's a 1 year or 2 year or 1.5 year preclinical curriculum. Also read through your secondaries, make sure you know what your essays convey about you. If there's anything that's missing from your essays that you want to bring up, maybe jot a note down so you remember to bring it up during the interview. I do want to emphasize that you do not need to know every single nook and cranny about the school. I've been an admissions representative for some of the Zoom interviews, basically just having no say in the interview process, but just like being there to answer questions. And some of the applicants have really great questions about, for example, like research opportunities and the preclinical curriculum or even the clinical curriculum. But as a first-year med student, I also have the same questions about that. And so I feel like going into the interview process, I felt like I needed to know every single little thing about the school, have it all figured out, even though like I didn't even know if I was going to that school or if I would be accepted to that school. And so I think one thing that would have been helpful for me to know is that you actually don't need to know every little detail about the school. Just know the broad strokes and then ask questions. And the faculty are there to help you. They're happy to answer your questions. Yeah, and so don't stress too much about that. I also want to sort of give an overview of what interview days in general were like. So very broad strokes. It differs from med school to med school, but generally over Zoom, you'll go in, they'll sign you in. Sometimes you need a photo ID, sometimes you need your applicant number. There might be a waiting room, a lounge for students just to chat and get to know each other before you're pulled into your interview. And it is truly a setting where they want you to remain calm and not stress too much. I know it's so much easier said than done, but I think once you realize that the people on the admissions team are there to help you, try to like navigate the ins and outs of interview day, the physicians, usually it's physicians or other admissions people who are interviewing you, are there because they like students, they like want to help you. And generally, the interview is just a way to get to know you. You've already made it past the primary and secondary stage. You've gotten your interview invite. And so now the interview is just a chance for you to actually show who you are before the school makes their final decision. This advice of being who you are, being yourself, can be super just like over repeated. But the idea that the school wants to accept you for who you are kind of takes a load off of your shoulders. You don't have to pretend to be someone you're not. Just be true to yourself. Share the activities that you like. I've heard this piece of advice, basically like just throw everything out there and see what sticks. What I mean is if you like baseball, just like maybe mention like you're a baseball fan. Or if you like making YouTube videos, be like, oh yeah, I really enjoy, speaking on my YouTube channel. Or if you are a big runner, just things like that, don't be afraid to share because your interviewers are humans too. They have lives outside of medicine. They probably also like baseball. They probably also like running. They might like stitching and crafting and knitting. And just like, even if they don't, that sort of thing makes you an interesting person. And so just don't be afraid to share your hobbies in addition to your medical interests and your academic interests. Another thing that I want to point out is that on interview day, you might be put into waiting rooms, as I mentioned before. And when I was in those waiting rooms, I would always be like, oh my God, what if like the admissions people are evaluating me at this moment? What if my interviewers are evaluating me at this moment? And now being on the other side, I can say that the admissions team is like really busy. They don't have the time, energy, or capacity to be monitoring every single movement that you make. And so that just takes a load off of your shoulders. You don't have to be so hyper vigilant all the time. Of course, you do not want to be rude. You want to be professional. You want to be courteous to everyone that you meet on interview day, just as you would any other day. Like you just want to be a good human, right? But just don't stress yourself out over that. And before any interview, I think it's always a good idea, in addition to doing a little bit of searching on the school, I mentioned this before, but like look over your application, look over your personal statement, your activities, your secondaries as well, and why you want to go to the school. That will just not only make your interview more cohesive, but it will help calm your nerves because you've prepped something to say, you've prepped ideas to bring up. And so you do not have to write yourself a script. And in fact, like a script makes it a little bit unnatural and a little bit just staged in a way. So you do want to say, okay, maybe I want to bring up these 3 bullets in my introduction. For example, I did research in this lab, this biomedical engineering lab. I was a leader of this club. I also really like baking, and I love trying out new recipes from my family's collection or something like that. That kind of just adds a little spice, right? Like, it gives you something to talk about without it seeming so forced. And in regards to prepping for the interview, sometimes the school will tell you who your interviewer is, sometimes the school will not. And so if they don't tell you who your interviewer is, good for you, because then you don't have to stress about who's going to be on the other side of the Zoom call. Knowing who your interviewer is gives you a little bit of a heads up as to, what they do. For example, you might know that your interviewer is a pediatrician or is a cardiologist who is really into medical education. And so that's something, maybe if you're interested in that too, you can bring that up in the conversation. But I would say don't do too much digging into who your interviewer is, because you don't want to psych yourself out. So for one example, like, I had a student interviewer for one of the schools. And so I was like, oh, this person seems interesting. Let me just look them up and see what they've been doing. And I found that this person basically had like 50 publications before they even graduated medical school. And so that just really made me feel nervous talking to them, because I was like, oh my God, this person is so accomplished. How can I live up to them? And then that, I feel like, even if it's not explicit, it can subconsciously sort of alter the way that you speak, maybe make you a little bit more nervous during the interview. And so I'd say, just if you want to do some research into who's interviewing you, like maybe just to get to know them, that's fine, but do not be too intense about it. And lastly, I just want to point out that it's okay to be nervous. If you're nervous about this, it just means that you really care about it, and it's a medical school interview, and so you probably should care about it. During the interview day, try to get into your morning routine. Don't do anything that might throw you off, because you do want to be on your best game, like, during the interview. But that being said, it's okay if something happens and you're like embarrassed about it during the interview, because chances are your interviewer will just see that as like you being a human being, and you really don't have to stress too much about it or overthink it. I just remember in one of my interviews, I was drinking water out of my mug, and it was hot water. And sometimes, if you choke on hot water, it makes your throat pretty scratchy. And guess what? I choked on the hot water during one of my sips in the interview, and then my voice deepened by an octave, and it just sounded so scratchy all of a sudden, and I got super embarrassed, because I was like, oh my gosh, what is this doctor gonna think that I'm like what's happening? And then I realized, I'm like, okay, it's fine. This doctor is super nice. This interviewer just wants to help and just wants to get to know me. And so for that, I just sort of addressed and explained what happened with my voice, and we carried on. Think of it as a conversation with a human being, with the doctor, with someone who you'd potentially like to be one day. I think that will help calm your nerves a lot. So anyway, if you guys have more questions on med school interviews or the cycle in general, please comment them down below, and I will try my best to get to them. I want to thank you guys for your patience as well for this video, because med school has been ramping up a little bit. Block 2 just finished. We're actually in the second week of block 3. There are 3 blocks in the first semester at Columbia Med. We're really just trying to figure out our study schedules, trying to figure out the best ways to study for us, and just still maintain this sort of work-life balance, which is really important going forward. And I think overall, throughout this entire cycle, throughout your med school journey, just remember that you have to take care of yourself, spend time with yourself, and figure out life as well as medicine. So with that said, I want to thank you guys again. I keep saying thank you, but yeah, I really do appreciate you guys watching, and I hope that you will share this with your friends or your classmates or anyone that you know who's applying. And yeah, block 2 vlog coming up. I know I posted the block 1 vlog after 6 weeks of it happening. Block 2 is a lot of great stuff too. Hopefully block 3, which we're in now, will be even greater. And I can't wait to bring you guys along. Oh yes, of course, if you enjoy this video, make sure to give it a huge thumbs up and like, and that's basically the same thing, and subscribe and comment and share, and yeah, I'd appreciate that. That would really help me out. For real now, I'll see you guys later.